Vanity, the false glow that darkens the spirit. Shining the light of the Grail Message on human self-delusion. Part 1. The True Nature of Vanity. Chapter 1. What vanity really is. Self-glorification is rebellion against the laws of creation. Vanity is far more than an occasional pride in one's appearance or achievements. In its essence, it is a spiritual rebellion. It arises when the human spirit turns away from the order of creation and seeks to glorify the self above the law of divine harmony. In this turning, the soul attempts to anchor its worth in transient, earthly forms, appearance, status, or recognition, rather than in the eternal values of truth, love, and service. The Grail Message teaches that every spirit is a spark of the divine. When a person acts in vanity, they invert the natural law. The spirit, which should radiate light and alignment, becomes a magnet for self-serving influences. The radiations of the vain person project outward in a distorted pattern, drawing attention not toward higher life, but toward fleeting, superficial admiration. This is rebellion because it places the finite over the infinite, the transient over the eternal, and the shadow over the light. In practical life, vanity manifests as incessant comparison, competitiveness, and exaggeration of personal worth. While it may appear harmless or even pleasurable on the surface, its spiritual consequence is severe. It separates the individual from the protective and enlightening influences of the higher realms. The more the soul seeks self-glorification, the more it becomes entangled in illusions, and the less it can perceive the true laws of creation. Chapter 2. The Inner Void Behind Vanity. Why the vain person must constantly seek attention, praise, and mirrors. Vanity is never satisfied. It is like a hunger that cannot be satiated. The reason lies in the inner void that fuels it. At the core of vanity is a lack of anchoring in the spirit, a separation from one's own inner light. The vain person attempts to fill this emptiness through external validation, compliments, recognition, applause, and admiration. The Grail Message clarifies that all attempts to fill the soul through outward forms are futile. The higher the soul rises in truth and alignment, the less it requires external affirmation. Those trapped in vanity, however, become dependent on mirrors of every kind. Literal mirrors reflecting appearance, social mirrors reflecting status, and psychological mirrors reflecting approval. Each act of seeking praise or attention strengthens the radiational distortion, perpetuating a cycle of inner emptiness and outward pretense. True satisfaction is only possible when the spirit finds anchoring within itself, through humility, self-reflection, and alignment with divine law. Without this, the vain person remains a slave to others' eyes and opinions, unable to perceive the inherent worth that exists independent of worldly measure. Chapter 3. Vanity is a radiational distortion. How vanity darkens the spirit and drives away higher help. Every thought, feeling, and desire radiates outward, creating currents that influence both the earthly and spiritual environment. Vanity, by its nature, produces turbulence in these radiations. Where clarity and purity radiate calm and light, vanity emits a vibration of self-exaltation and disharmony. The Grail Message explains that such radiational distortion attracts influences aligned with the same pattern: shadows, deception, and obstruction. A person immersed in vanity not only distances themselves from the radiations of truth but also repels the subtle assistance from higher spiritual beings who can guide, protect, and enlighten. This is why, even in times of apparent success, the vain often feel dissatisfied, insecure, or unsettled. The radiational imbalance prevents the harmonious flow of life energy, leaving the soul exposed to error, misguidance, and internal strife. Correcting vanity requires conscious reorientation. The spirit must intentionally release the craving for self-exaltation, redirect radiations toward truth, and cultivate inner purity. Chapter 4. The Origin of Vanity in the Human Soul, Weakness of Will, Lack of Inner Anchoring, and the Fall from Simplicity. Vanity does not arise spontaneously, it has a clear spiritual origin. The Grail Message teaches that it springs from weakness of will, an unanchored spirit, and the loss of simplicity. When the human being is not rooted in truth and moral law, even small desires for admiration or superiority can grow into full-blown vanity. The fall from simplicity refers to the gradual turning away from natural alignment. Instead of valuing inner radiance, the soul is seduced by appearances, social hierarchies, or personal gain. Weakness of will allows these attachments to gain power, and the radiations of the soul are increasingly misdirected. Over time, what began as a minor inclination becomes a dominant trait, shaping character, thought, and action. Vanity, therefore, is not merely an external habit, it is a spiritual condition reflecting the inner imbalance of the soul. Awareness of its origin is the first step toward liberation. Only by strengthening the will, cultivating humility, and anchoring oneself in the laws of creation can the soul reclaim freedom and radiate light rather than illusion. Part 2. The Faces of Vanity in Daily Life. Chapter 5. Vanity of Appearance, Obsession with Beauty, Clothing, Image, and the Body. Vanity of appearance is the most immediately recognizable form of vanity, yet its depth is often underestimated. It is not merely a desire to look presentable, but a compulsive need to be admired, envied, and constantly reflected in the eyes of others. Clothing, hairstyle, posture, makeup, and physical conditioning become instruments of self-affirmation rather than expressions of taste or health. The Grail Message clarifies that this form of vanity masks a deeper spiritual deficiency. When the soul seeks its value in mirrors or social perception, it distances itself from divine guidance. Radiationally, the vain person projects insecurity and preoccupation with the form, which attracts similar vibrations and reinforces the cycle. The more energy is devoted to appearance, the less remains for cultivating inner qualities such as humility, empathy, or clarity of thought. True beauty, the Grail teaches, is not in the form but in the radiations of the spirit. When one aligns with the laws of creation, radiational harmony naturally manifests in appearance without effort. The obsession with outward image, however, distorts these radiations, creating tension in both self and environment. Liberation begins with recognizing that worth is not in what is seen but in what flows from the inner being. Chapter 6. Vanity of Speech, Talking to Impress, Not to Convey the Truth. Vanity manifests in speech when words are wielded to impress rather than to communicate or enlighten. The vain speaker seeks applause, admiration, or validation rather than conveying truth or serving others. Conversations become performances, and silence, simplicity, or sincerity is avoided for fear it may reveal the inner emptiness. According to the Grail Message, speech is a radiational act. Every word carries intention, energy, and influence. When speech is contaminated by vanity, it produces dissonant radiations that cloud understanding, incite envy or rivalry, and repel higher spiritual assistance. Even subtle exaggerations or boasting distort the aura of the speaker, attracting energies aligned with self-exaltation rather than truth. Freedom from this form of vanity requires conscious observation and restraint. Speaking should be an act of service, a transmission of clarity and insight, rather than a tool for self-promotion. The vain person must learn to value silence and truth over applause and approval. Chapter 7. Vanity of Knowledge, Intellectual Showmanship and the Craving to Appear Wiser than Others. Vanity also emerges in the realm of the mind. Intellectual vanity is the obsession with being seen as clever, learned, or superior. It manifests in showing off knowledge, correcting others unnecessarily, or equating self-worth with mental accomplishments. The Grail Message reveals that knowledge is a divine gift meant to be applied in service, understanding, and spiritual growth, not as a weapon of ego. The vain intellectual radiates self-exaltation, which distorts thought forms, creating an invisible barrier that impedes both learning and true communication. The more one seeks to dazzle with knowledge, the more one distances the soul from wisdom, which is an integration of understanding, humility, and moral insight. True learning aligns the mind with the higher laws. It cultivates thought patterns that radiate clarity and attract insight, rather than attention. Awareness of intellectual vanity is therefore essential. The soul must distinguish between knowledge as a tool for growth and vanity as a means of self-aggrandizement. Chapter 8. Vanity of Achievements, the Need to be Seen, Applauded, Praised, and Validated. Achievement, in itself, is neutral. However, When it becomes a source of self-glorification, it is vanity. Those who pursue recognition for its own sake are enslaved to the opinions of others. Titles, accolades, promotions, awards, or social approval become addictive, and the individual's inner worth is measured externally. The Grail Message clarifies that achievements, if pursued aligned with spiritual law, can be instruments of service and blessing. When pursued from vanity, they radiate selfishness, pride, and subtle arrogance. Radiationally, this attracts opposition, envy, or imbalance, and repels the subtle guidance that could otherwise ensure success and true fulfillment. Freedom from this form of vanity requires a shift in motivation. Deeds should be performed as service, with detachment from external validation. The soul learns to value impact, moral correctness, and alignment with divine law over applause or recognition. In doing so, achievements become pure expressions of light, rather than mirrors of self-importance. Chapter 9. Spiritual Vanity, the most dangerous kind, using spiritual concepts to elevate the ego. Among all forms of vanity, spiritual vanity is perhaps the most subtle and destructive. Unlike vanity of appearance or speech, spiritual vanity hides behind nobility, religiosity, or moral superiority. It manifests when a person uses knowledge of spiritual laws, religious practice, or mystical insight to enhance self-importance rather than to align with divine will. The Grail Message warns that spiritual vanity is dangerous because it appears virtuous while it actually strengthens the ego and distances the soul from higher guidance. Radiationally, the spiritually vain project pride and subtle arrogance, attracting similar vibrations that obscure truth and impede genuine spiritual development. They may judge, correct, or manipulate others under the guise of righteousness, further entrenching the cycle. Liberation from spiritual vanity requires constant self-observation, humility, and the cultivation of inner transparency. Spiritual knowledge is a tool for service, for alignment with the laws of creation, not a platform for egoistic display. True spirituality radiates quiet strength, love, and clarity, untainted by self-interest. Part 3. The Spiritual Consequences of Vanity. Vanity is never harmless. Its effects ripple through the spirit, the aura, and the subtle planes, creating obstacles that limit the soul's growth, distort radiations, and bind the individual to repetitive suffering. Chapter 10. Vanity weakens the spirit, how it drains vitality, closes intuition, and fogs perception. The Grail Message explains that vanity consumes spiritual energy. Every act of self-aggrandizement draws attention and radiational strength inward rather than upward. This drain diminishes vitality, fogs perception, and weakens intuition. The vain person becomes increasingly dependent on external affirmation to maintain inner balance, unaware that this reliance creates a feedback loop of weakness. Radiationally, the vain project instability and self-centeredness, which disturbs the subtle currents around them. These distortions make it difficult for spiritual forces to guide, protect, or uplift the individual. The soul grows sluggish, unable to discern truth from illusion, because the light within is dimmed by constant self-focus. Chapter 11. The Law of Reciprocal Action and Vanity, Why the Vain Bind Themselves to Humiliation, Disappointment, and Emptiness. The Grail Message teaches that the law of reciprocal action operates universally. The energies one emits return. When a person radiates vanity, they attract circumstances that mirror their inner state. Applause may be fleeting, admiration may turn to envy, and pride often invites humiliation. Karmically, repeated acts of vanity create entanglements that manifest as disappointment, relational conflict, and isolation. The vain person struggles to experience genuine joy or contentment because their own distorted radiations repeatedly invite conditions that challenge, expose, or humble them. This is not punishment but natural law. The universe responds to the inner condition of the spirit. Chapter 12. Vanity and Wrong Attraction, How Vanity Draws Dark Entities and Spiritistic Influences. Vanity, by its nature, radiates a vibrational pattern that attracts lower, discordant forces. According to the Grail Message, spiritual beings aligned with ego, deception, or darkness are drawn to these radiations. They may subtly influence thought, cloud judgment, or amplify the cycles of pride and self-obsession. This does not mean every vain person is possessed, but it does mean that radiationally, vanity leaves the soul vulnerable. The energy emitted through self-glorification creates a magnet for influences that reinforce separation from light, complicating the path to inner clarity and spiritual maturity. Freedom begins with recognition. Observing vanity in oneself, understanding its consequences, and consciously redirecting thought, word, and deed toward humility, truth, and service. Chapter 13. The Collapse of the Vain. Why the laws of creation will eventually break vanity completely. The Grail Message teaches that no human ego can permanently resist the immutable laws of creation. Vanity, by its very nature, is a rebellion against the divine order. It seeks to elevate the self above natural, moral, and spiritual law, attempting to assert independence where independence is impossible. Eventually, this defiance encounters natural consequences. The radiational disturbance created by vanity attracts circumstances, situations, and energies that challenge, humble, or expose the ego. Pride crumbles under its own weight. The admiration once sought becomes fleeting. Trust and respect vanish when integrity is overshadowed by self-interest. Spiritually, the laws of creation act as corrective forces. They break the barriers that the vain construct around their inner light. This collapse is neither punishment nor cruelty, but a restoration of balance. The ego must be brought back into alignment with truth, humility, and order. Through these trials, the vain individual may awaken to the reality that lasting worth and true radiance lie not in appearance or applause, but in moral and spiritual alignment. The key is recognition before collapse, seeing vanity as the distortion it is, understanding its inevitable consequence, and consciously turning toward humility, service, and inner truth. Part 4. Common misconceptions about vanity. In modern culture, vanity is often misunderstood, misrepresented, or defended under the guise of healthy self-expression. The Grail Message provides clarity, distinguishing superficial self-adornment from genuine inner dignity. Chapter 14. Self-care is not vanity, distinguishing between healthy dignity and ego-driven display. Self-care, the practice of nurturing the body, mind, and spirit, is often confused with vanity. While the vain seek attention, admiration, and external validation, genuine self-care respects the divine laws of creation. Self-care is a responsibility, not a performance. Maintaining health, cleanliness, and poise allows the individual to function harmoniously in the world and maintain proper radiations. It is done quietly, without the need to impress others, and reflects alignment with natural law rather than rebellion against it. The Grail Message clarifies that the distinction lies in intent. If the purpose is external approval or ego reinforcement, it becomes vanity. If it is for inner order, balance, and alignment with higher principles, it is true care of the self as a sacred vessel. Chapter 15. Confidence is not vanity. True confidence comes from spirit, not from external ornamentation. Confidence rooted in vanity depends on appearance, reputation, or social approval. It is fragile, shifting with the tides of public opinion. True confidence, as described in the Grail Message, originates in the alignment of the spirit with divine law. The confident soul radiates stability, clarity, and calm, regardless of external circumstances. Their self-assurance is not boastful or attention-seeking. It reflects an inner harmony that cannot be disturbed by fleeting judgments or empty praise. Vanity pretends to be confidence but is insecure, reactive, and self-serving. Recognition of this difference allows one to cultivate real spiritual strength and radiational integrity, rather than chasing transient appearances. Chapter 16. Humility is not weakness. How genuine humility is a radiant strength in creation. Vanity often disguises itself as humility or condemns humility as weakness. The Grail Message clarifies that true humility is a profound expression of spiritual maturity and inner power. A humble person does not seek to dominate, impress, or manipulate. Instead, they act in accordance with law, serve others, and radiate truth and love. Humility aligns the will with divine order, strengthens radiational clarity, and allows higher guidance to flow freely. In contrast, vanity clings to ego and external recognition, weakening the soul's capacity to receive and give light. Genuine humility, far from being weak, is the foundation for spiritual resilience, moral strength, and lasting inner peace. Chapter 17. Exposure versus expression. Why not all visible action is vanity, but motive is the key. The Grail Message emphasizes that what the human eye perceives is never the full measure of an act. It is the motive behind the action that defines its spiritual quality. Human beings often confuse visibility with vanity. If something is seen, it must be ego-driven. This is a misconception. Expression, the externalization of inner truth, creativity, or service, is not vanity when its source is sincerity and alignment with law. A song performed, a painting shared, or a deed carried out may be visible to others, yet radiates light if the motivation is pure. Vanity, in contrast, is exposure without inner substance. The outward act is designed primarily to attract attention, admiration, or validation, rather than to fulfill law or duty. The Grail Message reminds us that all visible actions are measured by the Spirit's intent. Only alignment with law preserves radiational purity, while ego-driven exposure disturbs it. This distinction is crucial. One can live openly in the world, sharing talents and gifts, without falling into vanity, so long as the inner orientation is toward truth, service, and divine order. Part 5. The Dangers of Vanity in Modern Humanity. Contemporary culture amplifies vanity, making the inner void of humanity more visible and more contagious. The Grail Message calls attention to the subtle and overt ways society encourages self-glorification, distraction, and ego-inflation. Chapter 18. Social Media and the Worsening of the Disease of Vanity. Social media exemplifies the mechanization of vanity. Likes, shares, and comments act as external mirrors feeding the ego, creating cycles of dependency on public attention. The Grail Message exposes the danger. Radiations emitted through ego-driven self-display attract dark currents, fostering emptiness rather than fulfillment. The constant seeking of validation, the comparison with others, and the crafting of a curated image produce inner disturbance. The human spirit, which should radiate clarity and truth, becomes scattered, fragmented, and weak. Social media has amplified the temptation to live for appearance rather than law, increasing the prevalence of spiritual disorder masked as popularity or success. Chapter 19. The Fashion, Beauty, and Body Industry, How Humanity Has Turned the Body into an Idol. The obsession with bodily perfection is an age-old trap intensified by modern industry. The Grail Message clarifies, the human body is a vessel and instrument for the spirit, not an end in itself. Elevating appearance over character, radiational purity, or moral alignment creates a breeding ground for vanity. Clothing, cosmetics, surgeries, and enhancements, while not inherently evil, become instruments of vanity when the ego seeks admiration rather than alignment with law. Humanity's fixation on the body as a status symbol, an idol, or a measure of self-worth weakens the spirit and disturbs the natural radiations of the soul, attracting emptiness and spiritual vulnerability. Chapter 20. The Vanity of Titles, Followers, and Status, the New Idols of the Ego Age. Modern vanity is not limited to appearances, it extends into recognition, influence, and hierarchical position. Titles, social standing, numbers of followers, and public accolades have become idols, feeding the human ego. The Grail Message warns that these external validations, when sought as ends, create radiational disturbance. They distort the inner compass, drawing attention away from truth, law, and higher purpose. Individuals anchored in such vanity are prone to envy, manipulation, and moral compromise, while radiating darkness to others through unconscious imitation and admiration of ego-driven ideals. True authority, influence, and respect arise from alignment with the laws of creation, moral integrity, and inner humility. Anything built on the pursuit of external admiration is fragile, temporary, and ultimately destructive. Chapter 21. Emotional and relational harm caused by vanity, from pride to isolation to despair. Vanity is not merely an inner weakness, it radiates outward, shaping the quality of relationships, emotional stability, and the overall vibrational environment of the human being. The Grail Message teaches that vanity, by its very nature, is a self-centered distortion. It elevates the ego at the expense of the spirit, of others, and of truth. The first harm vanity brings is emotional disturbance. The vain person becomes obsessed with how they are perceived, constantly evaluating themselves against external standards or the imagined judgments of others. This perpetual comparison breeds anxiety, insecurity, and pride in equal measure. Pride, in this context, is not strength but a shield covering inner emptiness. It temporarily masks vulnerability but amplifies dissonance with higher law. Vanity also distorts relationships. Friends, family, and colleagues become mirrors and instruments in the vain person's pursuit of admiration. Genuine connection is replaced with transactional interactions. Conversations, gestures, and gifts are measured not by truth or service but by their potential to impress. The radiations emitted by vanity repel sincere bonds and attract superficial associations, leaving the individual increasingly isolated despite apparent social activity. As isolation deepens, despair often emerges. The Grail Message points out that no amount of external validation can fill the inner void that vanity creates. The human spirit longs for connection with law, truth, and the divine. When these are ignored in favor of egocentric pursuits, the soul suffers a slow, often invisible erosion. Even success, beauty, or admiration becomes insufficient, leading to spiritual fatigue, emptiness, and an inner sense of failure. Moreover, vanity propagates emotional contagion. Radiations of self-centered pride or insecurity do not remain confined, they influence those around the individual. A vain community becomes competitive, envious, and prone to discord. Relationships, work environments, and even families are subtly destabilized as vanity spreads like an unseen current, weakening collective harmony. The Grail Message therefore illuminates that vanity is far more than a personal flaw. It is a radiational disturbance, a spiritual misalignment that harms the self, others, and the broader sphere of life. Emotional stability, genuine human connection, and inner peace are incompatible with vanity's demands. The path of recognition. Awareness of motives behind actions is crucial. Are actions aimed at alignment with law or personal glorification? Reflection on relationships. Is connection authentic, or is it a means of validation? Observing inner feelings. Pride, envy, or obsession with perception signals the presence of vanity. Turning toward law and service. True emotional fulfillment arises when actions are oriented toward creation's order rather than self-display. The human being who begins to recognize the damage vanity inflicts can initiate inner purification, gradually replacing egocentric radiations with those of clarity, humility, and service, restoring harmony within themselves and their relationships. Part 6: Healing from Vanity. Chapter 22. Returning to Simplicity, the first step in breaking vanity's chains. The Grail Message reveals that vanity is not merely a set of external behaviors but a deep-seated distortion of the human will. It arises when the soul's longing for the divine is blocked by attachment to appearances, external validation, and the constant need for admiration. To heal from vanity, the human being must first return to simplicity, reorienting life toward inner truth rather than outward display. Simplicity is the foundation of spiritual strength. It is not the absence of culture, refinement, or beauty, but the alignment of intention with law and purpose. When simplicity is embraced, actions are motivated by authenticity rather than pride. Words are spoken for clarity and service rather than for impressing others. Appearance is maintained not for self-glorification but as a respectful expression of the divine order. Step 1. Recognition of the inner root. The first step toward simplicity requires honest self-observation. One must identify where vanity manifests. Is it in appearance, speech, intellect, achievements, or spiritual pretensions? By shining the light of awareness on these areas, the soul begins to break the unconscious compulsion to self-display. The Grail Message emphasizes that recognition without condemnation is most effective. Understanding the origin of vanity, its root in fear, insecurity, and separation from divine law, awakens the possibility of transformation. Step 2. Releasing attachments. Simplicity involves letting go of attachments to praise, admiration, and the illusions of superiority. This does not mean denying one's talents or gifts, but rather decoupling worth from recognition. The human being learns to act in alignment with inner law and service, independent of how others perceive them. Every act of conscious release strengthens spiritual radiations, allowing the light of the soul to shine unobstructed. Step 3. Cultivating inner anchoring. Vanity thrives in the absence of inner anchoring. The Grail Message teaches that the soul must anchor itself in law, in conscience, and in a quiet recognition of the divine presence within. Simplicity is cultivated when life is guided by these inner coordinates rather than by shifting social approval. Practices such as reflection, meditation, and prayer attune the soul to the natural order and stabilize radiations, making them harmonious and transparent. Step 4. Practical exercises in simplicity. Minimalism of thought. Avoid unnecessary self-promotion or comparison. Focus on truth and service. Humble expression. Speak only when necessary, and let words reflect honesty and clarity. Moderation of appearance. Dress and present oneself in a way that honors law without exaggeration or ostentation. Service-oriented action. Perform deeds for their intrinsic value, not for recognition or reward. By returning to simplicity, the soul begins to dismantle vanity's hold. It is the first act of liberation. The chains of pride, fear, and self-exaltation are loosened, and the spirit can gradually radiate authenticity, purity, and peace. The human being who chooses simplicity aligns their life with creation's laws, drawing higher help and protection. The light of truth begins to heal the radiational distortions vanity once cast. Simplicity is not a one-time act, it is a continuous practice, a way of living. Each conscious choice to place authenticity above image strengthens spiritual resilience, nurtures humility, and restores clarity to the radiations of thought, word, and deed. The soul learns that true beauty and strength arise from harmony with law, not from fleeting admiration. Chapter 23. Rebuilding the Inner Core, How Connection with the Spirit Dissolves Vanity Naturally. Vanity is not a superficial flaw, it is a symptom of inner emptiness and misalignment. The Grail Message teaches that the human being becomes vain when the soul is disconnected from the spirit, when the will is no longer anchored in law, and when inner guidance is replaced by the craving for external validation. To heal, one must rebuild the inner core, the essence of the self that is rooted in truth, law, and the divine. The inner core, seat of the spirit. The inner core is the meeting point between the human spirit and the soul. It is the central radiating point from which clarity, strength, and authenticity emerge. When this core is obscured by vanity, the radiations of the soul are distorted. Thoughts, words, and actions carry a shadow of self-exaltation, fear, and discontent. The Grail Message emphasizes that true strength and beauty arise from the radiations of a pure, connected core. Step 1. Establishing conscious connection with the spirit. Rebuilding the inner core begins with conscious contact with the spirit. This is not an intellectual exercise, but a living, experiential alignment. Practices include reflection and meditation to silence the ego and allow the voice of the spirit to emerge. Inner listening, observing the subtleties of conscience and law rather than following fleeting desires or social pressures. Prayer and devotion as expressions of alignment with higher order and will. As the human being strengthens this connection, vanity loses its hold naturally, because the soul begins to find its fulfillment in law, clarity, and inner harmony rather than in transient admiration or display. Step 2. Strengthening the will through spiritual anchoring. The Grail Message teaches that vanity thrives where the will is weak. A disconnected or unanchored will seeks validation externally, creating the endless cycle of pride and insecurity. To rebuild the inner core, direct the will consciously toward lawful action. Observe motives carefully. Ask, am I acting to honor the spirit, or to glorify myself? Replace automatic desires for recognition with deliberate choices that reflect inner strength and integrity. With a disciplined, conscious will, the soul's radiations align naturally with light, diminishing the need for ego-driven displays. Step 3. Purifying radiations through authenticity. The Grail Message teaches that every thought, word, and deed radiates outward, influencing not only the individual but their surroundings. Vanity distorts these radiations, creating turbulence in the spiritual and material spheres. Rebuilding the inner core involves purifying intentions by acting from love, service, and truth rather than from pride or fear. Living authentically, expressing gifts and talents without exaggeration or the expectation of applause. Observing the effect of radiations on oneself and others. When actions generate tension, envy, or manipulation, the soul knows the core is misaligned and requires attention. As radiations clear, the inner core grows stronger, and vanity diminishes naturally. The soul no longer craves mirrors or applause, it rests in its own harmony and connection to law. Step 4. Integrating spiritual practice into daily life. Rebuilding the inner core is not a one-time event but a continuous process. Daily acts of reflection, honesty, and service gradually reshape character and radiations. Observe the self without judgment, learning from each thought and action. Align choices with the laws of creation, prioritizing duty and inner truth over appearances. Use challenges and social interactions as mirrors to detect remaining traces of vanity. Through these practices, the inner core becomes a wellspring of radiational purity, naturally dissolving vanity and generating spiritual strength, humility, and clarity. The soul learns that true dignity arises not from what is seen or praised, but from the vibrancy and alignment of the inner spirit. Chapter 24. Practicing true humility, not self-debasement, but recognition of reality. Humility is frequently misunderstood. In the eyes of the world, humility can be confused with weakness, subservience, or even self-debasement. The Grail Message, however, illuminates a far deeper truth. True humility is the conscious acknowledgement of reality, of the laws of creation, and of the relative position of the human soul within the greater whole. It is a quality that fortifies the spirit and dissolves the subtle chains of vanity. Vanity and the illusion of self-importance. Vanity thrives on a distorted self-perception. The vain person magnifies their own importance, seeking constant validation, admiration, or envy from others. This misalignment creates tension, unrest, and spiritual darkness. By contrast, humility arises from the recognition that all life, all gifts, all achievements are expressions of divine order, and that the individual is a steward, not a sovereign, of creation. True humility is not self-denial for its own sake. It is not the negation of the self or the constant assertion that one is less than others. Rather, it is seeing oneself clearly, acknowledging strengths and weaknesses without exaggeration. Understanding the source of one's abilities, recognizing that all talents, opportunities, and insights flow from the divine. Balancing self-worth with responsibility, knowing that recognition of value does not necessitate flaunting or seeking approval. Step 1. Awareness of inner motives. The path to humility begins with self-examination. Whenever pride, comparison, or vanity arises, the individual must ask, am I acting from truth, or from the desire to glorify myself? By cultivating awareness of inner motives, one can gradually distinguish the authentic self from the ego-driven self. Vanity masks itself in small, subtle ways, through a tone of voice, a gesture, or a thought intended to impress. Humility discerns these impulses without judgment, simply observing and redirecting them toward truth and service. Step 2. Recognition of universal law. Humility is inseparable from the understanding of law. The Grail Message emphasizes that when the human will aligns with creation's law, the soul naturally rests in balance. The humble person accepts that life unfolds according to divine ordinance, beyond personal control or favoritism. Relinquishes attachment to recognition or praise, knowing that approval is transient and often misleading. Acts from conscience, guided by law, rather than ego-driven ambition. Step 3. Humility is radiational purity. True humility purifies radiations. Every thought and action that is free from self-exaltation resonates with light, clarity, and harmony. The Grail Message teaches. Radiations of vanity attract dissonance, tension, and darkness. Radiations of humility attract support, clarity, and spiritual guidance, aligning the soul with the higher realms. Humility does not seek reward. Its value lies in the restoration of the inner core and the strengthening of the spirit. Step 4. Active practice of humility. Humility is not a passive quality. It manifests through conscious behavior and the continual choice to honor reality over illusion. Serve without expectation, recognizing that true service benefits both giver and receiver. Speak truthfully, without embellishment or exaggeration, even when the ego resists. Receive feedback and correction gracefully, seeing it as an opportunity for growth rather than a threat to pride. Observe others' strengths, valuing them without comparison or envy. Through these practices, the soul learns that humility is a power, not a weakness. It liberates from the compulsions of vanity, aligns the will with law, and restores radiational clarity. The person who embodies true humility no longer needs applause, attention, or status. Their spirit shines as a living reflection of order, truth, and harmony. Conclusion. Vanity is ultimately a shadow of the soul's misalignment, while humility is the corrective light. By recognizing reality, acknowledging the source of all things, and practicing conscious alignment with divine law, the human being can transcend the ego, purify the radiations, and live authentically, free from the distortions of self-glorification. Humility becomes both a shield and a pathway, a living force that transforms inner emptiness into radiant strength. Chapter 25. Replacing vanity with purpose, redirecting energy into meaningful, light-filled action. Vanity consumes energy. Every thought, word, and deed driven by the desire to impress, to appear important, or to elicit admiration drains the spirit and clouds the inner light. The Grail Message reveals that this misdirected energy can be redeemed when consciously redirected toward purposeful, constructive, and spiritually aligned action. Understanding the misallocation of energy. Vanity is a form of spiritual misinvestment. The ego, in its need for recognition, diverts the life force from its true objective, growth, service, and the fulfillment of the soul's mission. A vain individual may excel outwardly in worldly terms, wealth, beauty, social status, but inwardly, the soul remains starved and entangled in subtle darkness. The Grail Message illuminates that all human energy is sacred. It is given by the Creator for development, learning, and alignment with divine law. Vanity redirects energy into illusion, producing temporary satisfaction but long-term inner emptiness. Purpose restores alignment, turning every thought, action, and radiation into a force for light and harmony. Step 1. Recognizing where energy is lost. To transform vanity into purpose, one must first observe where attention and effort are wasted. Is the desire to act motivated by self-glorification, or by genuine intention to contribute? Are achievements or possessions being pursued for external applause, or for the development of skill, character, and spiritual growth? Are thoughts and words being shaped to create illusions, or to convey clarity, truth, and understanding? Honest self-observation reveals patterns of misdirected energy, allowing the individual to reclaim what has been unconsciously surrendered to vanity. Step 2. Establishing a higher intention. Once misalignment is recognized, it is essential to replace ego-driven motives with purpose-oriented intent. Purpose is not arbitrary, it is aligned with divine laws. Service over self-interest. Each action should first consider the greater good and the upliftment of others. Creation over imitation. Focus on producing meaningful work or expression rather than copying what earns praise. Enlightened contribution. Strive to radiate truth, beauty, and order through every activity, transforming the personal into the universal. By consciously setting higher intention, the energy previously wasted in vanity now becomes a living current of light, amplifying spiritual growth. Step 3. Action is transformation. Redirecting energy is not only about inner contemplation, it requires practical, consistent action. Small, daily acts of service, helping others, teaching, supporting, or creating in alignment with truth. Dedication to learning and skill, cultivating knowledge and talent not for applause, but for mastery and the ability to contribute meaningfully. Honest self-expression, allowing one's gifts to flow without embellishment, self-promotion, or expectation of recognition. Through sustained purposeful action, the soul gradually releases attachment to vanity, replacing it with inner satisfaction derived from authenticity and alignment with creation's law. Step 4. Radiational purification. As actions align with purpose, the individual's radiational field transforms. Dark, self-focused radiations dissipate, freeing the soul from invisible entanglements created by vanity. Light-filled radiations increase, attracting support, guidance, and harmony from higher realms. Inner calm and clarity become natural companions, as energy is no longer fragmented by egoistic pursuit. The Grail Message emphasizes that true fulfillment comes from the conscious flow of energy in accordance with law, rather than from external recognition or transient pleasures. Step 5. Integration into daily life. Replacing vanity with purpose is not a single act but a continuous practice. Begin each day with conscious reflection. How will my energy serve the light today? Evaluate every decision and interaction for alignment with higher purpose. Celebrate growth in inner strength and radiational clarity, rather than visible success or praise. Over time, this practice reprograms the soul, transforming habitual vanity into habitual purposeful action, harmonizing the human will with the divine current. Conclusion. Vanity is a misdirected life force, purpose is the corrective current. By observing where energy is squandered, setting higher intention, acting with conscious alignment, and integrating these practices into everyday life, humanity can transform ego-driven emptiness into radiant, constructive power. The individual emerges not only purified of vanity but also empowered to manifest light, truth, and harmony, fulfilling the mission for which the soul has been entrusted with life. Chapter 26. The Role of Silence in Dissolving Vanity, Why Quietness Exposes the Ego. Vanity thrives on noise, external and internal. The vain person is constantly seeking validation, in words spoken, in attention received, and in the reflections of others. This external clamor nourishes the ego, masking the emptiness at its core. The Grail Message reveals that silence is a mirror, reflecting the true state of the soul and exposing the illusions that vanity creates. Silence is a revealer of reality. Silence does more than simply remove sound. In the stillness, all pretenses fall away, because there is no audience to impress, no distraction to feed the ego. The Grail Message explains that the human spirit is always transparent to the higher realms. Silence allows the soul to perceive itself as it truly is, without distortion from self-aggrandizement. In practice, silence removes the habitual chatter of self-promotion, revealing thoughts and motives previously unnoticed. Exposes desires for admiration or envy, bringing inner patterns into the light for correction. Enables self-reflection, allowing one to distinguish between genuine action and vanity-driven behavior. The more one embraces silence, the more the ego's facade begins to crumble, and the individual perceives the inner void that vanity attempts to fill with transient applause. Inner silence versus outer silence. It is not enough to simply sit in quiet. True dissolution of vanity requires inner silence, a stilling of the thoughts, judgments, and compulsions that drive the ego. The Grail Message teaches that inner silence is the soul's natural state, but the ego constantly distorts it with mental noise. Outer silence supports inner silence, but cannot substitute for the active discipline of observation and surrender. Through inner quietude, higher guidance and radiation of light become perceptible, helping the individual realign with divine law and purpose. Practical steps to cultivate silence. Daily periods of quiet reflection. Begin with short, intentional intervals of sitting without speech or mental distraction. Gradually increase the duration. Mindful observation of thoughts, Watch the mental flow without attachment or judgment. Observe where thoughts drift towards self-aggrandizement. Resisting the urge to respond. In conversations or social media, refrain from reflexive self-expression intended to impress. Allow the moment to exist without ego intervention. Alignment with the Creator. Use silence to turn inward, invoking the divine presence. Recognize that radiations of light respond to conscious stillness. Silence is a radiational purifier. When the mind and heart enter genuine quiet, dark radiations of vanity dissipate. The mental and emotional currents that fuel self-importance lose coherence, weakening the ego's hold. The spirit's natural radiance begins to shine unobstructed, attracting higher support and blessing. Actions taken after periods of silence are more authentic, grounded in truth rather than appearance. The Grail Message emphasizes that silence is a key instrument for spiritual purification, particularly for those struggling with vanity. By confronting the inner self without distraction, the individual begins to experience clarity, simplicity, and genuine humility, the antidotes to vanity's deception. The transformative effect. Over time, silence cultivates detachment from the need for external recognition. Inner serenity that radiates outward, influencing others positively. Increased self-control and wisdom, allowing actions to reflect purpose rather than ego. A radiant aura of light, naturally repelling vanity-driven influences and attracting harmonious energies. Silence is not an absence, but a powerful presence, a channel through which the spirit aligns with divine law, dissolves illusion, and reclaims the soul's natural dignity. It is in silence that the ego reveals itself, and in this revelation, healing begins. Conclusion. Vanity cannot survive where true silence reigns. The Grail Message illuminates that quietness is not mere absence of sound, but a deliberate, disciplined confrontation with oneself and the divine. In silence, the ego is stripped of its illusions, the spirit radiates its innate light, and the soul begins its path back to authenticity, humility, and alignment with creation's law. Silence, therefore, is not just a practice, it is a transformative gateway that exposes vanity and restores the human being to their rightful spiritual stature. Part 7: The Awakened Human Spirit. Life Beyond Vanity. Chapter 27. The Radiant Beauty of Purity, Why a Pure Spirit Shines More Than Any Ornament. Vanity clings to outward appearance, external validation, and fleeting admiration, mistaking these for true value. The Grail Message illuminates a profound truth. True beauty is the radiance of the spirit itself. It is not reflected in gold, jewels, or social recognition, but in the purity, clarity, and harmony of the inner being. The awakened human being discovers that nothing material can surpass the luminous essence of a spirit aligned with divine law. Purity is inner radiance. Purity is the natural state of the spirit when it is unclouded by vanity, ego, and self-interest. The Grail Message emphasizes that purity is not simply moral correctness, but the unobstructed flow of life force through the human soul. A pure spirit radiates warmth, clarity, and harmony, touching everyone it encounters without effort. This radiance is self-sustaining, needing no external adornments or validation, because it emerges from alignment with creation. Where vanity creates a distorted reflection, purity produces a living, dynamic light, visible not in mirrors, but in the influence and peace it bestows upon the world. The superiority of spiritual beauty. Humanity often confuses beauty with ornamentation, clothes, cosmetics, gestures, and social displays. Yet the Grail Message reveals outward beauty fades, bound to temporal laws and material decay. Inner beauty grows, nourished by integrity, compassion, humility, and love. Radiational beauty is permanent, extending far beyond physical existence, influencing not only fellow humans but the very spiritual environment. A person of true purity may appear ordinary to the eyes, yet their presence carries a magnetism and peace that worldly decoration can never achieve. How purity transforms daily life. Purity manifests in all aspects of life, creating a radiational harmony that replaces vanity-driven distortions. The awakened human being. Speaks and acts from truth and intention, not to impress or dominate. Treats others with respect and empathy, fostering sincere connections rather than superficial admiration. Resists the allure of fame, power, or material excess, because the spirit recognizes these as fleeting and incapable of sustaining true joy. Allows life circumstances to reveal lessons and refine character, without clinging to outward approval. Through these practices, the human being cultivates a beauty that is alive, vibrant, and enduring, far beyond the transitory allure of appearances. Radiation is the measure of true beauty. The Grail Message explains that all creation operates through radiation, a subtle emanation of inner state. Vanity emits dense, turbulent radiations, attracting disharmony and limitation. Purity, in contrast, emits light, clarity, and balance, harmonizing with cosmic law. Attractive radiations, drawing support, guidance, and harmonious interactions. Healing currents, influencing the environment and spiritual surroundings positively. Thus, the radiant beauty of a pure human is tangible not only to higher spiritual senses but also to the material world, influencing relationships, decisions, and even unseen currents of creation. Purity and the freedom from vanity. The awakened human being no longer seeks external recognition. Purity liberates from the compulsions of vanity because it fills the inner void that vanity attempts to mask. The Grail Message clarifies. Freedom is inseparable from purity. A spirit can only radiate light when it is unburdened by egoic distortions. True fulfillment comes from inner alignment, not applause or outward admiration. The spirit becomes a beacon, attracting others toward higher understanding, not imitation of superficial forms. Conclusion. Vanity is transient and hollow, whereas purity is enduring and radiant. The awakened human being discovers that real beauty is not what is seen, but what is radiated. By cultivating integrity, humility, compassion, and devotion to truth, the human soul shines with a light far more magnificent than any external ornament. In this light, life itself becomes a reflection of creation's order, and the individual becomes a living testament to the supremacy of inner radiance over outward display. Purity is therefore not a restriction, but a liberation, the path to freedom from vanity and the gateway to a life where every thought, word, and action reflects the divine harmony of creation. Chapter 28. Freedom from Praise and Blame, Standing Upright in the Light of Truth. Humanity is enslaved as long as it seeks validation from others or recoils from judgment. The Grail Message teaches that freedom from vanity is inseparable from freedom from the duality of praise and blame. The awakened human being does not bend with every wind of opinion, nor does he inflate or shrink under applause or criticism. Instead, he stands upright in the light of truth, anchored in the eternal law of creation. Why praise and blame bind the spirit? Praise and blame are two sides of the same coin, external dependency. The vain person seeks praise to satisfy inner emptiness, while avoiding blame to protect fragile self-image. This creates attachment to others' opinions, which shifts the spirit's direction like a leaf on the wind. Radiational turbulence, because egoic dependence attracts confusion, envy, and disharmony. Spiritual inertia, as the soul cannot act freely while it fears censure or craves approval. The Grail Message illuminates that these reactions are symptoms of separation from the divine core. They are not only limitations but distortions, keeping humanity trapped in cycles of self-deception. The source of true freedom. True freedom is found when the spirit measures itself against no human standard, but only against the law of creation. Standing upright in truth entails inner alignment, living in accordance with the Creator's laws rather than the fluctuating will of society. Self-responsibility, owning thoughts, words, and actions without projecting blame outward or demanding applause. Detachment from external recognition. Praise no longer inflates, nor blame diminishes, the spirit's stability. The Grail Message emphasizes that freedom from praise and blame is not indifference, but clarity of judgment and purity of intent. The awakened human responds naturally, guided by inner light, not by the sway of public opinion. The radiational effect of equanimity. A human who has transcended the desire for praise and the fear of blame emits calm, harmonious, and steady radiations. These radiations stabilize relationships and environments by creating resonance with truth. Draw others upward, not because of charisma or show, but because the presence itself is harmonious. Repel lower distortions, as energies of falseness and envy cannot remain near the radiations of a spirit upright in truth. Equanimity before human judgment is thus not passive, but an active, dynamic principle of radiational purity. Practical steps to stand in the light of truth. The Grail Message provides guidance for cultivating this freedom. Observe motives. Constantly question whether actions are taken to please others or to act rightly. Detach from outcome. Recognize that results, approval, or criticism are beyond control, only intent is truly yours. Practice inner dialogue. Align every thought with truth, testing every decision against the law of creation. Strengthen the core. Through reflection, meditation, prayer, and acts of service, nourish the spirit so that it requires no external props. By following these practices, the human being gradually untangles from vanity and dependence, becoming stable in the midst of praise and blame alike. The power of uprightness. Standing upright in the light of truth is more than a personal victory, it has cosmic significance. The Grail Message explains. The human spirit aligned with law strengthens universal order. It becomes a living pillar of light, radiating balance to other humans, the environment, and unseen realms. It transcends fear, doubt, and the compulsion to impress, anchoring life in freedom and authenticity. The awakened human being realizes that approval and condemnation are transient, while the law of creation is eternal. Vanity falls away because it no longer finds purchase in the soul. Conclusion. Freedom from praise and blame is the hallmark of the awakened human being. It is the ultimate liberation from the ego, the final victory over the illusions of vanity. To stand upright in the light of truth is to walk the path of pure radiance, unaffected by fleeting human opinion, guided only by inner clarity and alignment with divine law. In this freedom, the human spirit shines steadily, influences positively, and becomes a living example of creation's harmony, demonstrating that true strength and beauty arise not from the eyes of the world, but from the unseen but radiant alignment with truth. Chapter 29. Living Without Masks, the Joy and Power of Authentic Existence. Vanity thrives behind masks. Every mask, whether it is a show of beauty, intellect, humor, or piety, hides the true spirit, replacing authenticity with appearance. The Grail Message teaches that the human being is most alive, most free, and most effective when he lives without masks, embracing his inner truth as the guiding light of every thought, word, and deed. The nature of masks. Masks arise from the ego's fear of imperfection and desire for validation. They manifest as pretended competence or knowledge, to impress others; artificial charm or flattery, to gain attention or approval; feigning emotions or intentions, to manipulate perception or avoid rejection. The human spirit that wears masks is constantly at war with itself, expending energy to maintain illusions while losing connection with the inner core. This inner conflict generates turbulence in the spirit, radiations that repel truth, and invites lower influences that thrive on distortion. Why authenticity is radiant. The Grail Message illuminates that authenticity aligns the human being with the natural laws of creation. Clarity in thought. Without masks, the mind is unobstructed and perceives reality as it is. Purity in emotion. Genuine feelings flow naturally, radiating stability and warmth. Integrity in action. Deeds stem from true intention, not fear or desire for reward. Living authentically generates radiations of harmony and truth, which influence not only oneself but also others and the environment. The spirit becomes a beacon of clarity, drawing those around it toward equilibrium and upliftment. The joy of maskless living. Freedom from masks is not mere absence of pretense, it is joy in being, security in the inner self, and the natural flow of life. This joy arises because The spirit is no longer burdened by pretense or self-deception. One is free from fear of judgment, praise, or blame, knowing that inner alignment with the law of creation is the ultimate standard. Every interaction is a direct reflection of truth, building genuine relationships and meaningful life experiences. The Grail Message emphasizes that inner joy is inseparable from authenticity, for the human spirit cannot be light and free while hiding behind falsehood. The power of authentic existence. Living without masks empowers the human being in practical and spiritual ways. Decisions are clearer because they arise from the inner core, not external pressures. Radiations are steady and positive, strengthening the environment and influencing others constructively. Spiritual maturity accelerates, as the soul no longer wastes energy on deception and can instead attune fully to divine guidance. Authenticity, therefore, is not weakness but a profound source of strength, freedom, and purpose. The human who lives without masks anchors himself in the law of creation, becoming a living example of clarity and stability. Practical steps toward living without masks. The Grail Message provides guidance to remove the masks and embrace authentic existence. Self-observation. Honestly note where pretenses, fears, or desires for approval influence actions. Acceptance of imperfection. Recognize that the spirit's value lies in alignment with truth, not in perfection or social approval. Alignment with inner core. Daily reflection, prayer, and conscious effort to let intention follow truth. Radiational awareness. Monitor the effects of thoughts, words, and deeds, choosing those that emanate light rather than distortion. Through these practices, the human being gradually sheds all false layers, stepping into a life that is free, joyful, and radiant. Conclusion. Living without masks is the ultimate liberation from vanity. It restores the human being to the law of creation, strengthens the spirit, and generates radiations of truth and clarity. In this state, one experiences the power of authenticity, relationships deepen, actions become effective, and life itself resonates with the divine order. The awakened human being knows that the truest beauty and strength lie not in appearances, but in living as one is, fully, openly, and honestly. The joy of maskless existence is the natural reward of alignment with the eternal, the real, and the divine. Chapter 30. The Noble Human, a life anchored in truth, simplicity, and genuine greatness. The Grail Message repeatedly emphasizes that true nobility is not bestowed by titles, wealth, or outward recognition, but arises from the spirit's alignment with the laws of creation. A noble human lives beyond vanity, not seeking applause or admiration, but cultivating inner strength, clarity, and purity. The foundation of nobility. Nobility is anchored in three key qualities. Truthfulness. The noble human speaks, thinks, and acts in accordance with reality. There is no mask, no pretension, no attempt to manipulate perception. Truth is both the anchor and the light by which the spirit navigates life. Simplicity. Simplicity is not poverty of spirit or intellect, but freedom from unnecessary complexity, deception, and vanity. A noble person values the essentials, the development of the inner being, the service of others, and alignment with divine law. Genuine greatness. Greatness is measured not by external accolades, but by the capacity to radiate light, to uplift others, and to remain steadfast in principle. This is the greatness that does not fade with time, for it resides in eternal truths, not fleeting appearances. Living beyond vanity. The noble human has overcome vanity not by force, but through conscious transformation. Recognition that seeking approval or attention is a shadow that hides the spirit. Releasing attachment to beauty, achievements, or status as sources of self-worth. Placing the life of the spirit above material, social, or superficial concerns. In this state, every action flows naturally from the inner core, radiating integrity, warmth, and clarity. Such a person does not compete with others for recognition but lives in harmony with the laws of creation, where effort, intention, and impact are inseparable. The radiations of the noble human. The Grail Message teaches that the human spirit radiates constantly, influencing the surroundings and shaping life outcomes. The noble human's radiations have specific qualities: clarity and calmness, which stabilize chaotic environments; strength without aggression, which inspires confidence and respect; harmony and goodwill, which attract light-filled influences and support spiritual growth. These radiations are measurable in effect, even if unseen, for they are part of the natural order through which the laws of creation operate. By living in alignment with truth, simplicity, and genuine purpose, the noble human becomes a point of light in a world often clouded by vanity and superficiality. The joy of noble living. Beyond radiations, the noble human experiences inner joy and freedom that cannot be obtained through external validation. Peace of mind arises because the ego no longer dictates decisions. Life is purposeful because actions serve divine law and benefit the spirit, rather than satisfying fleeting desires. Relationships are authentic and meaningful, no longer tainted by pretense or hidden agendas. This joy is inseparable from the maturity and responsibility of the spirit. Nobility is thus both an inner state and an active practice. It is what one is and what one does, simultaneously. Practical steps toward nobility. To cultivate a noble life, the Grail Message recommends daily self-reflection. Observe whether thoughts, words, and deeds arise from truth or vanity. Purification of motives. Choose actions for their alignment with divine law, not for reward, praise, or recognition. Service without attachment. Engage in deeds that help and uplift, free from desire for personal gain. Anchoring in simplicity. Minimize distractions, excess, and attachments that cloud the spirit. By following these practices, the human being gradually aligns with the natural order, develops authentic greatness, and radiates the qualities of the truly noble. Conclusion. The noble human is the culmination of the path beyond vanity. Anchored in truth, simplicity, and genuine greatness, the spirit becomes a living example of what is possible when one ceases to serve the ego and begins to serve the eternal laws of creation. In nobility, there is freedom, joy, and a radiance that not only strengthens the individual but also uplifts the world around them. The Grail Message illuminates that nobility is the natural outcome of spiritual awakening, the living proof that humanity can rise above superficiality, self-deception, and the endless cycle of vanity. Conclusion. Vanity is an illusion, only the spirit endures. In the light of the Grail Message, vanity is revealed not merely as a flaw in character or social ill, but as a spiritual misalignment. It is a distortion of the soul's natural radiations, a clouding of inner clarity by attachment to the transient and the superficial. Vanity masks the truth of the spirit with illusions of self-importance, beauty, knowledge, or achievement. The illusion of vanity. Vanity convinces the human being that external appearances define worth, that admiration, attention, or power can fill the inner emptiness. It is a temporary and deceptive comfort. Like a mirage, vanity promises fulfillment but delivers only further craving and frustration. The Grail Message illuminates that all material and social validations are ephemeral, and cannot provide the soul with true sustenance. Appearance and image. Clinging to the body, clothing, or outward beauty distracts from cultivating the inner light. Praise and recognition. Seeking applause or admiration binds the spirit to others' judgments, weakening freedom and moral clarity. Achievements and status. Elevating worldly success over spiritual growth fosters pride and radiational imbalance, attracting darkness rather than light. All these manifestations are shadows of the spirit, illusions that vanish with time. Only the spirit itself, anchored in truth and aligned with divine law, endures eternally. The spirit is the true measure. The Grail Message teaches that what truly matters is the state of the spirit, not its temporary external expressions. The spirit is the core of human existence, the radiating center that interacts with creation, attracts light or darkness, and determines the human destiny. A spirit free from vanity is clarity-filled. Perception is no longer clouded by self-importance or desire for validation. Strong and upright. Moral and spiritual strength flows from alignment with divine law rather than external reinforcement. Radiant and uplifting. Its influence nurtures harmony, attracts support, and inspires growth in others. By cultivating the spirit, one transcends the illusions of vanity, dissolves the cravings of the ego, and experiences true freedom. The path beyond vanity. Overcoming vanity requires conscious effort and inner transformation, guided by spiritual insight. The Grail Message emphasizes recognition. Admit the presence of vanity and its effect on the spirit. Awareness is the first step toward liberation. Purification. Purify thoughts, words, and actions, replacing self-glorification with service, humility, and purpose. Realignment. Anchor life in truth, simplicity, and the eternal laws of creation, rather than in fleeting appearances. Radiational harmony. Focus on emitting clarity, love, and moral integrity, which reshape the environment and self. Through these steps, the human being gradually releases attachment to the superficial, turning inward to the enduring radiance of the spirit. Vanity's ultimate futility. The Grail Message clarifies that all worldly vanities, beauty, titles, knowledge, status, are transient. They cannot protect, elevate, or nourish the spirit. In contrast, the spiritual achievements, purity, humility, alignment with truth, endure eternally. Vanity is therefore a form of self-deception that binds the soul to illusion. Only through awareness, discipline, and inner growth can one break free. Final reflection. In the end, vanity is revealed as nothing more than a shadow, a distraction from the true purpose of human life. The spirit alone is the measure of lasting value. By turning attention from ephemeral admiration to the cultivation of inner light, humanity can rise above the superficial, awaken to its true nature, and live in freedom, clarity, and purpose. Vanity, then, is an illusion. Only the spirit endures. Let this truth guide the human being toward authentic living, noble radiations, and eternal alignment with the laws of creation. Epilogue. The coming purification, a humanity forced to stand without the decoration of ego. The Grail Message shines a stark light on the state of humanity, revealing that the age of superficiality and ego dependence is drawing to a close. Vanity, which has long veiled the inner truth of men and women, cannot endure before the immutable laws of creation. The world is approaching a purification, a time when humanity will be compelled to face itself without the ornaments of the ego, the applause of the crowd, or the glitter of outward success. Vanity is a barrier to truth. Vanity has been humanity's constant companion, subtly binding the spirit to illusions of worth derived from external forms. People have measured themselves by appearance, praise, status, and influence, while neglecting the radiance of their own spirit. In this state, the soul grows weak, intuition falters, and true moral and spiritual strength diminishes. The Grail Message reveals that no external decoration, no mask, can withstand the purifying touch of divine law. Just as a fire burns away impurities in metal, the coming purification will strip away all pretenses, revealing the core of each human being. The necessity of forced awakening. Many will resist. The ego is tenacious, and vanity feels comforting. Yet, the laws of creation cannot be swayed by human desire. This purification is not a punishment but a necessary awakening. It forces humanity to abandon superficial dependence. Reliance on approval, admiration, and worldly status becomes impossible when the illusions of society collapse. Face the radiations of the spirit. Every action, thought, and word radiates consequences. In the absence of distraction, humans encounter their true radiational signature. Recognize eternal values. Only the inner spirit, aligned with truth, humility, and purpose, remains steadfast. Through this process, the world is cleared of false idols, the vanity of materialism, ambition, and self-importance, so that genuine spiritual qualities may flourish. The awakening of inner strength. The Grail Message emphasizes that real strength is invisible to the eye, measurable only by the clarity and radiance of the spirit. When the veil of vanity falls, humanity will learn to stand upright without applause, finding validation in alignment with divine law rather than human praise. Move freely without fear of judgment, as the ego's crutches are removed. Radiate truth, love, and humility, creating a chain reaction of light and harmony in society. This is not an abstract promise, it is a living reality for those who choose inner vigilance and cultivation now. The purification may appear harsh, but it is precisely the medicine the world needs to awaken from its slumber of vanity. The radiational imperative. Every human being is bound by the law of radiation. The ego, vanity, and self-glorification emit dense, dark currents that attract disruption and suffering. In contrast, purity, humility, and truth radiate light that supports life, harmony, and spiritual ascent. The coming purification exposes the quality of these radiations, leaving no room for pretension. Those who have prepared their spirit, who have sought to dissolve vanity and cultivate authenticity, will remain luminous, while those attached to the superficial will encounter dissonance and awakening through hardship. This is a natural, universal consequence, not an arbitrary judgment. A call to conscious preparation. The Grail Message calls every human being to awaken before the inevitable forces of purification demand it. It urges reflection. Examine where vanity still holds sway in thoughts, words, and deeds. Detachment. Release attachment to appearances, praise, and societal approval. Alignment. Anchor life in truth, moral integrity, and spiritual purpose. Radiational vigilance. Cultivate a life that emits clarity, peace, and harmony. By doing so, one transforms from a dependent, ego-driven being into a resilient, awakened spirit capable of enduring and flourishing through the coming purification. Final vision. The future is a world in which the human spirit stands unadorned but unbroken, radiant in simplicity, humility, and authenticity. Vanity will have no foothold, and the laws of creation will shine in every heart. Humanity will rediscover its true measure, not in decoration, applause, or status, but in inner clarity, moral strength, and harmonious radiations. The Grail Message illuminates this path, urging every soul to choose light over illusion, spirit over ego, and truth over vanity. The purification is near, the opportunity for conscious preparation is now. In the coming world, humanity will finally stand as it was always meant to stand, clear, upright, and unadorned, radiating the essence of its own spirit. Appendix. Practical guidance for living free from vanity. The Grail Message not only clarifies and enlightens but also provides practical pathways for those striving to overcome vanity and live in alignment with spiritual law. This appendix serves as a hands-on companion for reflection, exercise, and conscious transformation. 1. Daily self-examination. Vanity often hides behind habitual patterns and unconscious desires. The first step is honest self-observation. Each evening, reflect on thoughts, words, and actions. Identify moments when ego-driven desires or self-glorifying tendencies emerged. Ask, did I act to serve truth, others, or the Creator, or did I seek attention, praise, or recognition? Record observations in a journal to cultivate awareness and gradual transformation. Purpose. To make the invisible motives visible and begin conscious correction. 2. Practicing silence. Silence is a tool to dissolve vanity. Dedicate at least 15 to 30 minutes daily to complete inner silence. No speaking, no entertainment, no distractions. Use this time to listen inwardly, feel the radiations of your spirit, and observe the ego's subtle pull. Over time, the habit of silence reveals the emptiness behind vanity and strengthens the inner core. Purpose. Silence exposes the ego, allows the spirit to radiate freely, and reduces dependence on external validation. 3. Humility exercises. Genuine humility is active, not passive. Engage in small acts without recognition, such as helping others silently or performing duties without seeking acknowledgement. Practice gratitude for all experiences, including those that challenge or humble you. Replace thoughts of, "Look at me," with, "How may I serve?" Purpose. Humility strengthens spiritual radiations and diminishes the appeal of vanity. 4. Purification of radiations. Every thought, word, and deed emits radiations. Purification is essential. Begin the day with conscious intention. Let all my actions today radiate clarity, truth, and peace. When encountering negative impulses, pause and redirect energy toward constructive, pure, and helpful action. End the day by visualizing your radiations cleansing darkness and tension accumulated through the day. Purpose: to transform the habitual emission of vanity-driven radiations into luminous, harmonious currents. 5. Detachment from applause and recognition. Vanity thrives on external validation. Practice conscious detachment. Before undertaking an action, ask, am I doing this to serve or to be admired? Observe feelings of pride or discomfort when your efforts go unnoticed. This is an indicator of residual vanity. Gradually cultivate the ability to act purely for the sake of truth and service, independent of external acknowledgement. Purpose: to internalize moral and spiritual self-reliance, freeing oneself from the chains of vanity. 6. Reflection on divine law and reciprocity. The Grail Message emphasizes that every action returns according to law. Meditate on the consequences of vanity in your life and in society. Visualize the radiational flow of cause and effect. Actions rooted in vanity attract disturbances, while actions rooted in truth attract light and harmony. Align daily decisions with the laws of creation, not the fleeting desire for approval. Purpose: to strengthen understanding of spiritual responsibility and the necessity of acting in alignment with universal law. 7. Regular acts of authentic service. Practical application reinforces internal growth. Serve others quietly, without announcing or expecting reward. Engage in small, honest acts of generosity, guidance, or assistance. Observe the joy and radiational uplift that occurs when service replaces self-absorption. Purpose: to reorient life toward spiritual purpose, replacing vanity with meaningful contribution. 8. Awareness of social and cultural traps. Human society constantly reinforces vanity. Observe cultural patterns that feed self-glorification. Social media, celebrity culture, vanity-driven industries. Limit exposure to environments or media that amplify egoistic tendencies. Create a conscious daily rhythm that prioritizes reflection, study, spiritual practice, and authentic interaction over spectacle and competition. Purpose: to protect the inner spirit from external reinforcements of vanity. 9. Integration into daily life. The ultimate goal is living without vanity while fully engaging with the world. Practice authenticity in relationships, work, and self-expression. Embrace simplicity, clarity, and moral uprightness in all interactions. Periodically reassess progress and realign with the principles of truth, humility, and radiational purity. Purpose: to make the dissolution of vanity permanent, allowing the human being to stand upright, radiant, and spiritually free. 10. Closing affirmation. Each day, conclude with a conscious affirmation. I release all vanity and seek only the radiance of truth. May my spirit act as a beacon of clarity, humility, and service in the world. This practice anchors the soul in the principles of the Grail Message, reinforcing freedom from ego and vanity while strengthening alignment with divine law. The appendix provides a practical bridge between knowledge and lived experience. The Grail Message emphasizes that truth without action remains inert. By daily integrating these exercises, reflections, and attitudes, the human being gradually dissolves vanity, strengthens the spirit, and radiates harmony, ultimately preparing for the purified, awakened life envisioned in the earlier chapters.